The Bible, with its deep spiritual significance, has long been a source of prophecy regarding the resurrection of Israel. Imagine standing before a powerful image in the Old Testament. The Valley of Dry Bones recorded in Ezekiel 37. This is not just a miraculous story, but a profound spiritual symbol. The prophet Ezekiel saw in a vision a valley full of dry bones, the remains of the people who seemed to have been wiped out of history. But then, in the vivid imagery of prophetic vision, God commanded. The bones began to come together, each bone connecting to another, covered with tendons, flesh, and finally filled with the breath of life, becoming a living body. This image is not only symbolic, but also carries a great message of hope for the Jewish people. It was a divine promise that, no matter the hardship or disaster, their nation would never be destroyed. Instead, they would be resurrected, stronger and ready to face any challenges. Now, imagine for the Jewish people in the diaspora, the period of dispersion across the world. This prophecy became a beacon amidst a stormy sea of life. Since the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE by the Roman Empire, millions of Jews have been forced to leave their homeland and live in exile. They carried with them the faith and promise from the Bible that one day they would return to the promised land. Ezekiel's prophecy of resurrection was not just a fairy tale, but a source of strength that helped them endure thousands of years of exile. And then, when the modern state of Israel was reestablished in 1948, many could not hide their emotion as they believed this was a fulfillment of Ezekiel 37. The image of dry bones being resurrected in the vision was now a living reality. Jews from all over the world returned to their homeland, bringing with them their faith and the desire to rebuild their country. But to fully appreciate the meaning of the Valley of Dry Bones, we must delve deeper into the connection between prophecy and actual history. Ezekiel's prophecy is not just a theological message, but an endless source of inspiration for Jewish culture and identity over millennia. During the darkest nights of history, when the Jewish people faced persecution, expulsion, and even genocide, the story of the Valley of Dry Bones became a song of hope. It told them that no matter how deep the darkness, the light of resurrection would eventually shine. This belief helped the Jewish people preserve their identity and continue their traditions and rituals through many generations. Imagine, in the small homes of Jewish communities confined in medieval Europe, the story of the Valley of Dry Bones was recited during Torah study sessions. Children were taught that nothing could shake their faith in God's promise. In songs and festivals, this image of resurrection was always invoked as a symbol of eternal hope. Ezekiel's prophecy was not only found in the sacred texts, but flowed through the veins and hearts of the Jewish people, becoming an inseparable part of their culture and soul. Therefore, when we look back at the establishment of the State of Israel, it is not just a political victory, but the resurrection of a dream that had lasted for centuries. Jews from all over the world poured into the Promised Land, carrying stories of survival and undying hope. The dry bones in the valley truly stood up, not only in Ezekiel's vision, but in the living reality of history. A people who seemed to have vanished were now standing strong, building a new future based on faith and aspiration. However, the meaning of this story is not confined to one people or one nation. It is a powerful reminder that within each of us, even the most desperate circumstances, there exists a hidden strength for resurrection. The image of the Valley of Dry Bones in Ezekiel is not just for the Jewish people. It is for all of us. It says that when we have faith and take action, miracles can happen, whether in our personal lives or in our communities. Belief and hope can turn the impossible into the possible. Take a moment and think about this. If a people can endure thousands of years of exile and still retain their identity, then we too can overcome the challenges in our lives. If dry bones can come to life, we too can find the strength to rise from loss and suffering. This is the deepest message Ezekiel's prophecy offers. It is not just a story of the past, but a call to action for the present and future. In our most difficult moments, Remember that the light of resurrection is always ahead, as long as we hold fast to our faith and act with all our heart. Thus, when we reflect on the story of the Valley of Dry Bones, let it not just be an image in the Bible, but a source of inspiration for us to face every challenge. Let it remind us that faith not only helps us survive, but also helps us live stronger and more fully. After Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 CE by the Roman Empire, the Jewish people were scattered across the world in what history refers to as a diaspora. However, no matter where they went, they maintained their cultural, religious distinctiveness and spiritual connection to their homeland, Israel. The 19th and early 20th centuries witnessed the Jewish revival movement, known as Zionism. The movement's leaders, such as Theodor Herzl, called for the establishment of an independent homeland for the Jewish people. This enthusiasm was fueled by the persecutions and hardships faced by Jews in Europe. Waves of Jewish migration to Palestine, known as Aliyah, began in the late 19th century with the goal of establishing a foundation for the future of the Jewish state. An important aspect of this process was a revival of the Hebrew language as the official language, which helped bring Jewish culture back to life on the land of their ancestors. Jewish settlers built kibbutzim, collective agricultural communities, founded towns, and developed infrastructure, laying the foundation for a modern state. Meanwhile, global historical events also contributed to the formation of Israel. World War I changed the political situation in the Middle East, with the 1917 Balfour Declaration from the British government expressing support for the establishment of a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. Despite strong opposition from the local Arab population, Jewish organizations continued to push forward with their goal. However, it was a Holocaust during World War II that emphasized the urgent need for an independent state for the Jewish people. Over 6 million Jews were murdered in the Nazi genocide, compelling the international community to recognize the necessity of a solution. This tragedy awakened the conscience of humanity, leading to the United Nations decision in 1947 to partition Palestine into 2 states, one for the Jews and one for the Arabs. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, the leader of the Jewish community in Palestine, declared the establishment of the State of Israel. This event was not only the culmination of more than a century of effort, but also a testament to the persistence and aspirations of a people. The State of Israel immediately faced war as neighboring Arab nations attacked, but they successfully defended their independence. The journey to 1948 was not only a story of politics and conflict, but also a testament to the power of faith and human will. From the days of exile, the Jewish people never ceased to maintain their spirit and culture, overcoming every difficulty to realize their dream of reestablishing a nation on the historic land of their ancestors. This story is not just part of Jewish history, but also an inspiration for all those fighting for their freedom and right to live. In 1947, after much debate, the United Nations passed Resolution 181, proposing partition of Palestine into 2 separate states. This decision led to much controversy and conflict, but for the Jewish people, it was a historic opportunity to build a homeland. The months following the resolution were a period of intense preparation, with the establishment of temporary governmental bodies, the creation of military, and readiness to face challenges from the Arab side. As the Day of Independence approached, pressure from neighboring countries and the Arab community intensified. But despite the dangers, the Jewish community in Palestine remained united and well-prepared. On May 14, 1948, in Tel Aviv, David Ben-Gurion read the Declaration of Independence, officially proclaiming the birth of the State of Israel. This was an emotional and historic moment for Jews worldwide, marking the end of centuries of exile and the beginning of a new chapter. The connection between religion and politics in the revival of Israel is a complex and profound story, reflecting intertwined historical, spiritual, and political elements in the formation and development of the modern state of Israel. To understand this connection, it is essential to view it from the perspective of religion, historical political factors, and how the Jewish revival movement, Zionism, combined both elements to lead to the establishment of Israel in 1948. Religious belief and the Jewish revival movement are indispensable in the combination of religion and politics. In the Bible, the land of Israel, also known as the Promised Land, is seen as a gift from God to the Jewish people. This is part of the covenant that God made with the patriarch Abraham, continuing through generations. Therefore, even during thousands of years of exile, despite living in many different countries, the Jewish people have always maintained the belief that one day they would return to the land that God had promised. The Zionist movement, although emerging under the influence of political and social factors in the late 19th century, cannot be separated from its religious foundation. Leaders of this movement, such as Theodor Herzl, recognized that establishing a Jewish state was not only a political necessity, but also fulfillment of a religious promise recorded in the Bible. The leaders of the Zionist movement understood that the restoration of the state of Israel was not just a recovery of territory, but also the realization of a divine plan, where the Jewish people had to return and reestablish their homeland. Although the Zionist movement did not focus solely on religious elements, but also included nationalism and political aspirations, the belief in God's promise of the Promised Land remained an important part of the movement's ideals. Religious followers and influential figures within the Zionist movement could not overlook the establishment of Israel as part of a greater plan, fulfilling a prophecy mentioned in the Bible. As the Zionist movement grew, particularly in the early 20th century, the connection between religion and politics became increasingly evident. The Jewish political struggle to establish their own state was driven not only by social and economic factors, but also by the strong religious belief that the period of exile had ended, and the Jewish people were returning to their homeland. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration by the British government paved the way for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine, marking a significant turning point in the Zionist movement. This declaration was not only a political action, but also carried religious significance, as Palestine for the Jewish people was not just a piece of land, but a sacred place deeply linked to their religious history. Palestine is home to Jerusalem, the holy city of the Jews, where the Holy Temple, according to the Bible, was the place where God had manifested. When the United Nations approved the partition plan for Palestine in 1947 and officially recognized Israel as an independent state in 1948, it was not only a political victory for the Zionist movement, but also the fulfillment of a religious prophecy. The establishment of the State of Israel was seen as a restoration of the Jewish people, their return after thousands of years of exile, in accordance with what had been recorded in the Bible. The connection between religion and politics is also reflected in the role of religious leaders in the Zionist movement. Although the movement was primarily led by politicians and thinkers who were not always aligned with religion, the role of religious leaders in promoting the reestablishment of Israel cannot be overlooked. While many political leaders like Theodor Herzl viewed the establishment of a Jewish state as a political and nationalist solution, some religious leaders saw it as a fulfillment of religious prophecies. These leaders believed that Israel was not just a state for the Jewish people, but also the restoration of the Jewish kingdom during the Old Testament, a nation chosen by God. Although there were differing opinions among religious leaders about whether the return of the Jews signified the arrival of the Messiah, it is undeniable that the majority of the Jewish community agreed with the idea of reestablishing the state of Israel, not only for political reasons, but also for religious ones. Therefore, the integration of religion and politics in the Zionist movement was a key factor leading to the establishment of the State of Israel. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 was the perfect combination of religion and politics for the Jewish people. The creation of the state was not only a political triumph, but also a manifestation of faith in God's promise regarding the restoration of their nation. This event was significant not only for the Jews, but also for Christian believers. As in the Bible, the Jewish people are seen as a chosen people of God with a special mission. Many Christian believers also viewed the revival of Israel as a significant sign in God's plan of salvation. In the Old Testament, the promise of the restoration of Israel is linked with the coming of the Messiah, a time when the Jewish people would return and reestablish their kingdom. Therefore, the establishment of Israel held meaning not just for the Jewish people, but also for Christians who saw it as an important event in their faith. Since its establishment in 1948, Israel has faced numerous challenges, both politically and religiously. While it has built a strong nation, Israel still faces internal conflicts between different religious groups within the Jewish community, as well as disputes with Arab nations and Palestinians over rights and territories. Nevertheless, despite these challenges, the connection between religion and politics remains a key factor in maintaining and developing Israel. The reestablishment of Israel is not just a recovery of a nation, but also a religiously meaningful process, closely tied to belief in God's promise and fulfillment of prophecies in the Bible. Spirituality in the comparison between history and the modern era plays an incredibly important role, especially when it comes to the revival and rebirth of Israel. The rebirth of Israel is not only a political event, but also one with deep spiritual significance for the Jewish people and the Christian community. The comparison between the past and present within the spiritual context of Israel helps us understand that this restoration is not only the result of political strategies or power struggles, but also the fulfillment of prophecies and the completion of a divine plan that was foretold thousands of years ago. Spirituality in the comparison between history and the modern era not only reflects religious elements, but also represents part of the historical journey that the Jewish people have gone through. For them, history is not just a series of events, but a spiritual journey with challenges and sacrifices, events through which they recognize God's presence in their people's lives. Therefore, the comparison between history and the modern era in the light of spirituality is a key factor in deeply understanding the rebirth of Israel. The history of the Jewish people is a long journey filled with tragedies and challenges. From the time the people were exiled from the Promised Land during the Babylonian exile, 605 to 539 BCE, to their painful journey through the centuries, they have faced countless difficulties, including prejudice, attacks from great empires, and genocides, most notably the Holocaust and World War II. Despite enduring many periods of suffering and loss, the belief in restoration and rebirth never faded in the hearts of the Jewish people. It was this belief in God's promise of the Promised Land and the return of the Jewish people to the land of their ancestors that kept their hope alive through dark centuries. During the exile, even though they were no longer in the Promised Land, the Jewish people maintained their religious traditions and the belief that one day they would return to their homeland. This is clearly illustrated in hymns, daily prayers, especially the prayer L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. For them, history is not just a sequence of events, but a spiritual journey to reclaim their identity and restore their relationship with God. The history of the Jewish people is a series of ups and downs, but also a strong affirmation of their steadfastness in God's protection and their belief in their return to the Promised Land. Through thousands of years of exile, the Jewish people continued to observe religious rituals and maintain a sacred relationship with God because they believed that God would never forsake them and that one day they would return to their homeland. When Israel was reestablished in 1948, many Jews saw this as a fulfillment of biblical prophecies. From a religious perspective, the establishment of the State of Israel is part of a grand plan that God had set for the Jewish people. It is not only a political victory, but also the completion of a long-held promise of returning and restoring the Jewish nation after thousands of years of exile. Spirituality in the comparison between history and the modern era is especially evident through Israel becoming a free and independent nation. For the Jewish people, the rebirth of Israel is not merely a political event, but a turning point in their salvation history. It is in this context that many see the reestablishment of Israel as a sign of salvation and fulfillment of God's redemptive plan. This is not only significant for the Jewish people, but also greatly affects the Christian community. In the Bible, the restoration of Israel is seen as a sign of the return of the Messiah. Therefore, for many Christians, the establishment of Israel in 1948 is not only meaningful for the Jewish people, but also the fulfillment of prophecies about the coming of the Messiah. This is a crucial moment, not only in Jewish history, but also in the broader context of religious history. The spirituality of the Jewish people in comparison between history and the modern era connects historical events with their belief in God. Events such as the Jewish people's exile, the rebirth of Israel, and the challenges that the country faces after its establishment can all be viewed through a spiritual lens as parts of a larger plan that God has set for this people. The history of the Jewish people is a series of painful events and challenges, but it is also a journey of restoration. The suffering that the Jewish people have endured, from the Babylonian exile to Holocaust, is not seen as an end, but rather as part of the process of salvation. They believe that in every stage of history, whether painful or difficult, God has always been present, and in all these challenges, they were never abandoned. The fact that Israel became a free and independent nation in 1948 is seen as a manifestation of God's presence in history. For many Jews, this is not just a political event, but the fulfillment of prophecies, a sign of restoration, and the return of the Jewish people to the Promised Land. The establishment of the State of Israel is not only a political event, but also one of deep religious significance. For those who believe in the prophecies in the Bible, the restoration of Israel is a sign of the end of the exile period and beginning of a new era, where the Jewish people will live in peace and freedom under God's protection. Christian believers also view the restoration of Israel as a significant event in God's plan of salvation, one that directly relates to the return of the Messiah. One of the most striking aspects of the comparison between the history and modern era of Israel is the fulfillment of biblical prophecies. In the Bible, particularly in the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel 37, the nation of Israel is described as dry bones that will come to life, and the country will be restored in the future. When Israel was reestablished in 1948, many Jews and Christians saw this as a fulfillment of that prophecy. The image of the dry bones coming to life in the Bible is viewed as a metaphor for the restoration and rebirth of the Jewish people after thousands of years of exile. The establishment of the State of Israel is not only a political event, but also one of deep religious significance. For those who believe in the prophecies in the Bible, the restoration of Israel is a sign of the end of a period of exile and the beginning of a new era, where the Jewish people will live in peace and freedom under God's protection. Christian believers also view the restoration of Israel as a significant event in God's plan of salvation, one that directly relates to the return of the Messiah. Although the establishment of Israel in 1948 was an important milestone, maintaining and developing the country remains a challenging journey. Israel faces wars, internal conflicts, and international issues. But through all these challenges, the Jewish people continue to hold firm in their belief in God's presence. For them, this is part of the divine plan, and they believe that every difficulty they face is just a step in the challenging journey that God has set for their people. The connection between spirituality and history continues to play a central role in Israel's development. The event of Israel's establishment is not just a territorial restoration, but a manifestation of belief in a grand plan of God. Despite facing many challenges and difficulties, the belief in God's protection remains a key element that helps Israel overcome obstacles and continue to grow in the modern era. Spirituality, in comparison between history and the modern era of Israel, is a story of restoration perseverance, and an unwavering belief in God's promise. It is proof that the history of this people is not merely a series of events, but a divine journey, where each event, each challenge, holds profound spiritual meaning. The resurrection of Israel is not only a political event, but also a deeply spiritual one, closely connected to the religious, historical, and cultural elements of the Jewish people. The process of the nation's rebirth involves a strong intertwining of religious promises, the determination of the Jewish people, and political factors in the modern context. Since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, not only the Jews, but also many Christian believers view this event as a fulfillment of biblical prophecies. For the Jewish people, the founding of Israel is proof that God has kept his promise about the promised land, a promise that the Jewish people have awaited for thousands of years. After long exiles and countless challenges throughout history, the reestablishment of Israel is not only the victory of a people, but also the restoration of a sacred nation. According to Jewish believers, this is a fulfillment of the prophecy in the Bible, particularly in the books of Ezekiel and Jeremiah, which speak of Israel's return and revival from the dry bones. In addition to the religious element, politics also plays a crucial role in Israel's resurrection. In order to rebuild a Jewish nation, early leaders realized the need to combine both religious and political factors harmoniously. The Jewish community, which had been dispersed around the world, shared a common goal: to reestablish and protect a nation in the historic land of their ancestors. The emergence of the Zionist movement in the late 19th century and the establishment of Israel after World War II were the result of this effort. Historical elements, such as the national movement, Jewish migration, and the leadership of religious organizations, contributed to laying a strong foundation for creation of the State of Israel. The connection between religion and politics in Israel's rebirth is also evident in the policies of the Israeli government. From the very beginning of its establishment, Israel's government faced numerous challenges, ranging from building a social foundation and developing the economy to dealing with diplomatic issues. However, despite being a modern nation, the influence of religious values remained strong in Israeli society, particularly in decisions related to land, peace agreements, and approaches to religious matters. For example, the protection of Jerusalem as a sacred city for all three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is a sensitive issue not only for Israel, but also for the international community. The relationship between religion and politics in Israel is not only reflected in political decisions, but also in cultural and social aspects. Religious values are clearly seen in religious holidays, Sabbaths, and other cultural traditions. This creates a strong connection between politics, culture, and religion, making the existence and development of Israel not only dependent on political factors, but also reinforced by spiritual and religious values. In addition to political and religious elements, Israeli society reflects a cultural diversity where different religions have a significant influence. Israel is not only a country for Jews, but also a home to Muslim and Christian communities, with a long history of interaction between these religions. This creates an environment in which the harmony between different religions is highly valued. Although in practice, it still faces difficulties in resolving issues related to land and religious rights. From a religious perspective, Israel's establishment also brings hope to Christian believers who see the return of the Jewish people as a sign of fulfillment of prophecies in the Old Testament and an essential part of God's salvation plan. Israel's rebirth in 1948 became a sign that God was fulfilling his promises, paving the way for the return of Messiah, a significant event awaited by many Christians. The combination of religious and political factors affects not only the Jewish people, but also the Christian and Muslim communities, each with its own perspective on the importance and meaning of this event. From a historical standpoint, Israel's resurrection also demonstrates the undeniable strength of national spirit and faith in justice. Despite facing numerous attacks, genocide, and discrimination throughout history, The Jewish people have remained steadfast in preserving their identity and faith in restoration. The establishment of Israel is proof of their ability to overcome adversity and protect their people's rights. It is also a lesson about resilience, faith in the future, and the importance of preserving traditions and identity in the modern world. Finally, the connection between religion and politics in Israel's rebirth is a clear testament to the integration of religious, cultural, and political factors in the founding of a nation. The establishment of Israel is not merely a political battle for independence, but a fulfillment of a religious promise, a return to the promised land of the Jewish people, blending historical, social, and spiritual elements. This is significant not only for the Jewish people, but also for Christians, who see it as a fulfillment of prophecies in the Old Testament. The fusion of religion and politics not only strengthens the state of Israel, but also creates a story of hope and resurrection, serving as a lesson for other nations and peoples in their journey to maintain and develop their cultural, religious, and political identities.